All right, hello everyone, and welcome to our recorded webinar of how the new PEP regulations affect local jails. My name is Amanda Nowak, and I'm a senior program associate at the Vera Institute of Justice. I'll be presenting on this topic and moderating our panelist portion of the session. So we have a full agenda today. First, we will review the Second Chance Act and the National Reentry Resource Center. Then I will cover a brief overview of PEP regulations in jail settings. Next, we'll move into the panelist discussion with experts in the field to learn more about how they are working with the new regulations. And finally, I'll discuss some of the next steps with resources to provide to you before we close out the session. So first, I want to read that this project was supported by grant number 15PBJA-23-GK-05506-MUMU, awarded by the Bureau of Justice Assistance. The Bureau of Justice Assistance is a component of the Department of Justice's Office of Justice Programs, which also includes the Bureau of Justice Statistics, the National Institute of Justice, the Office of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention, the Office for Victims of Crime, and the SMART Office. Points of view or opinions in this document are those of the authors and do not necessarily represent the official position or policies of the U.S. Department of Justice. The Second Chance Act supports state, local, and tribal governments and nonprofit organizations in their work to reduce recidivism and improve outcomes for people leaving incarceration. The Second Chance Act has supported over $600 million in reentry investments across the country. Passed in 2018, the Second Chance Reauthorization Act builds on and strengthens the initial landmark legislation. Now, the National Reentry Resource Center is currently supported by the Council of State Governments, or CSG, as the technical assistance provider. It delivers technical assistance, or TA, and training for Second Chance Act grantees, advances the knowledge base of the reentry field, promotes what works in reentry and successes of grantees, facilitates peer networks and information exchange, provides information for people returning to communities and their families. The National Reentry Resource Center, also, like I mentioned, CSG Justice Center operates the NRRC as a collaborative project of BJA and OJJDP. The primary mission of the NRRC is to advance the knowledge base of the reentry field. The NRRC serves as a convener and coordinator of Second Chance Act grantees. Okay. So now I wanted to give a brief overview of the PEP regulations in jail settings. So first, some history. Prior to 1994, Pell Grants were available to people who were incarcerated through traditional Pell, that students who were non-incarcerated could also access. However, in 1994, the crime bill passed and it prohibited people confined in prisons from accessing Pell Grants. It did not, however, prohibit people in jail from accessing traditional Pell Grants. In 2016, the Second Chance Pell experiment was launched, and it gave select prisons and colleges the ability to begin offering college and prison Pell-eligible programs in a very limited basis. This experiment was deemed successful, and so as of July 1st of 2023, Pell was reinstated for people who are criminally sentenced. So where previously the crime bill and Second Chance Pell experiment did not impact people confined in jails, the new Pell regulations actually do impact populations of people confined in jails. So in order for those who are criminally sentenced and confined in some type of correctional facility, be it a jail, a work farm, detention center, prison, etc., to utilize federal financial aid in that correctional facility, that facility must offer a designated prison education program in accordance with the U.S. Department of Education regulations. So for this to happen, the partner postsecondary institution or college must undergo 3 levels of approval. First, the oversight entity, which is the jail or other specified corrections entity authorized to approve on behalf of the jail. Then the college's accreditor. And finally, the U.S. Department of Education. There are then additional regulations for both the college and the correctional facility to follow, but that is outside the scope of this presentation. We are actually planning another webinar to cover some of those details in the coming months, so please stay tuned. So when it comes to implications for jails, those who are criminally sentenced must participate in a U.S. Department of Education designated PEP in order to utilize federal Pell grants. For those who are not criminally sentenced, including those who are pretrial or unsentenced, or are serving a sentence that is not considered a criminal sentence, they can actually draw on the federal Pell grants in the traditional way, or the way that students on the outside would draw on Pell. So their college program doesn't have to be a PEP in the jail in order for them to take advantage of federal financial aid. There are jails that have mixed populations, so I will say that there's nothing preventing a student who is not criminally sentenced from participating in the same courses and programs as those who are criminally sentenced, but the reverse is not true. So some jails are finding it best to have a PEP so that way everybody could participate. If you are criminally sentenced, the only way to utilize that federal Pell financial aid is to have an approved PEP program by the Department of Education. Right, so now that we've covered some of the basics, I'm really excited to get into the panel portion of today's presentation so you all can see how 3 different jurisdictions are navigating the new PEP regulations. So first we'll have Lisa Aubin, the Director of Education of Middlesex Sheriff's Office in Massachusetts. Then we'll have Dr. Machli Joseph, the Compass and NIH project leader for the Prison to Professionals and a student success coach at Hudson Community College in New Jersey. And last but certainly not least, we'll have Muriel Leewright, the education director for the Louisiana Department of Public Safety and Corrections. So now I will stop my screen share just so we can see our presenters a little better, and I'll ask them each to introduce themselves, the programs they offer, and other contexts about the facilities they work in. So Lisa, you are up first.
Wonderful. So as Amanda said, I'm the Director of Education for the Middlesex Sheriff's Office in Billerica, Massachusetts. I've been in this position almost 5.5 years. We had a pretty good program already in place, but I've definitely added a lot to it. We, do a high-set program, but then we're very involved with our college education programs here. We work with Merrimack College right now. We have a kind of unique situation here because we have a lot of guys that come in that already have their high school diplomas. So our college program is actually bigger than our high set program. I probably have a wait list of about 50 guys right now waiting to get in. Besides the college, we do a lot of vocational training. We just started a virtual reality vocational training program, some CDL training, restorative justice. We do, the ESOL. So we do all the regular programs, but our college education is a pretty big portion of what we do in our education department. We have primarily just a little bit of a background. Our sentence guys have no more than 2.5-year sentences. And then we also have pretrial. It's kind of unique now because it used to be more sentence guys than pretrial, but now we have a larger number of pretrial. So we definitely mix our classes. We have both pretrial and sentenced in our classes. So, but yeah, we're very excited to get started on this PEP. Like I said, we have a big wait list, so the guys are ready for it.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Machli, you're up next.
Yeah, hi. As the project leader for Prison to Professionals, the NIH Compass Grant is designed to foster collaboration and innovation and research that supports health disparities. And so that I work in that capacity where we're trying to expand internet and telehealth services in state prisons. And then my role as a student success coach with Hudson County Community College is, I've worked with the academic and workforce pathway program. So at Hudson County Community College, we're offering virtual degrees and workforce training to incarcerated students. And so it's a one-of-a-kind program because you're actually working, inside a jail, not a state or federal prison. And so it's a collaboration between the college, Hudson County Correctional Center, the Hudson County Department of Housing and Community Reintegration. So it's a great program for those that are there. And so look forward to expounding a little bit more about it.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And Muriel.
Hey, my name is Muriel Leewright. I'm the Education Director for Louisiana Department of Public Safety and Corrections. I've been in corrections about 9 years. Started my career teaching the high step class and moved up to a regional coordinator and the director in 2022. So I oversee all the programs, kind of similar to what Lisa said. We start from literacy all the way up to post-secondary programming. We've seen that there's a huge increase we've got waiting lists for these Pell programs. So we're excited about it and excited to collaborate with all of you today.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So I have a few questions planned and I'll go ahead and get started in asking them. So the first question is for Lisa. So you're in the midst of working with your local community college to propose a PEP. So can you just bring us up to speed real quick on where you're at in that process?
Sure. So we're actually in the process of working with Middlesex Community College to develop our prison education program. They came to us and presented their idea for this entrepreneurship certificate program. It's a 16 credit program. The idea is to complete it in 1 year, which is wonderful for us. As I said, the longest sentence these guys have is 2.5 years, and the majority is under a year. So to have something that they can complete in 1 year is fantastic. So we've met with them a number of times. We wrote up the proposal. We finally submitted our application and our signed MOU and our data sharing agreement to the New England Commission of Higher Education. We're waiting for that for them to receive their accreditation from that, basically saying that they are going to have a satellite, college basically in our facility. And once they receive that accreditation, it will go to DESE for their final approval. So we're just kind of waiting on that. We're looking at a timeline, start date of probably fall 2025. So it's definitely taking longer than we thought. We started this process about a year ago. They've had a bit of a turnover, so it definitely delayed a little bit, but it is a longer process than we expected. But I think in the end, it's going to be worth it. We have a lot of guys that, due to Corey issues, things like that, they are really interested in starting their own businesses. And so to have this entrepreneurship certificate in hand is going to be really helpful for them. Middlesex has also agreed to take those credits and apply them to their business associate's degree program upon reentry. So we satisfy that requirement for the PEP, but it's also, exceptional for our guys. The community college is right in our local area. It's in our county. So a lot of our guys are going to be, releasing to this area. It's going to be easy for them to access this college. So it's going to work out well for everybody once we get through this whole program, the whole process.
Awesome. Thanks so much. And I think that's words of wisdom that you're imparting on us, that it does take a long time. It's not an overnight process. So I really appreciate that message. So next up, my question is for Muriel. So how have the new regulations changed the existing work you were doing with local jails? Oh, you're muted.
I did that because I'm located on off the interstate and the Mississippi River Bridge, so I have to mute myself, so I apologize for that. Just to explain the landscape of Louisiana a little bit, of course, we're very different in many ways here. We have about 30,000 incarcerated individuals. Over half are housed in local jails, local facilities, which could be a detention center, a parish prison, whatever you want to call it. So approximately 15,000 are housed at the local level. So it's very different for us. So we've seen a huge expansion. You know, when they hear dollars, we have all types of providers that have come out of the woodwork. So it's been just really strategically looking at the area, high demand, high wage careers, and deciding what we're going to put where, because we don't want to oversaturate. Everybody wants welding, for instance. So we've had to look at programs and varying those programs statewide, so we don't have too many in one location, and we're not able to provide quality education to those students. So the expansion at the local level is huge, probably 50 or 60 meetings. We've got about 13 applications right now. 2 have been approved. So Lisa, there's hope. It's taken a while. We're hoping for January 2025, but we were hoping for this last summer. So it's been a process, and we've learned a lot along the way. And Vera has helped greatly with that. I will say that.
Mm-hmm.
I really appreciate that. Always great when we can get a little shout out, but also just to see that the scale of this will definitely impact the work and what's required and what needs to get put into it. Because I know some jurisdictions are working, focusing on one facility at a time, and then there's others that are thinking about how can we make this work on a systemic level in our state. So I really appreciate that insight you're able to share.
And I will add one other thing. In contrast to Lisa, we have from 2 years all the way up to life sentences. So trying to decide, I want to give the incarcerated individuals that have life sentences, I want to give them access too, because they go home every day, and a lot of times they go home with very little programming because they didn't think they'd ever go home, right? So we don't have those restrictions. So just trying to have a happy medium or a good process or procedure in place to determine, how many will funnel through a year, different things like that. So that's kind of a struggle with us right now, is we have such a large difference between sentencing lengths. So that's something that we're dealing with.
Yeah, I definitely appreciate that. I think it's, different states and jurisdictions have different, compositions of what's the demographic like in the jails that you're serving. And so that's a really good reminder that it's not just a clean cut traditional jail sentence in every situation. And so how do you navigate that? I'd like to turn the next question to Machli, and I wanted to ask about whether you have plans to become a PEP and whether you can tell us about the route or the structure and the reasoning for not going the PEP route.
Yeah, I think that when you look at the relationship here in Hudson County with Hudson County Department of Housing and Community Reintegration, the Hudson County Correctional Center, and the college, a lot of this was formed during COVID. So back in 2020, this was formed well before the Appropriations Act of 2024 for the Pell Grant ever came in existence, right? And so I think that they, although I wasn't one that was part of those leadership meetings, I understand the historical background and why they've decided to keep it local and go through its own kind of funding mechanism. Is kind of really to, one, it was already established prior to waiting before the PEP was enacted. And I think it's working, right? I mean, they have their own funding. I mean, I think right now the funding mechanism is about $150,000, I believe, per year, per semester. And the students have options, right? I mean, Lisa talked about, their entrepreneur certificate and that pathway, and if they're interested and they can go the credit route. And it's been similar for us. I mean, these students have access to both the academic and the workforce. They have options, right? Which degree path they want to go to. And so they get virtual instruction, they get a dedicated computer lab. We even offer some of the resources that the college offer. They'll get a student success coach. They'll get some of the resources. They'll get tutoring services. So we do offer it as if they're like on campus, taking courses. And when you look at the data, some of the outcomes of the program, 59% of enrolled students completed a course as of summer 2023. And we had 6 students who were released, continue their education at Hudson County Community College. And then we had 2 students graduate with an associate's degree. And so I don't think that the college would want to deviate what they've done in the county, especially because of the partnerships. But I do know, like, if this funding mechanism was no longer available through this partnership, then we already have a template to navigate and go ahead and create and go through the PEP process.
Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think this is a testament to it doesn't always make sense to go the PEP route, especially if you have alternate funding sources. And there are sometimes benefits. So you brought up a really good point of the students having more options. One of the limitations with the PEP route is that each degree, path, or major, so to speak, that you choose has to become approved as another PEP. And so that's, as we've already heard, a very lengthy process. And so there are benefits to not doing it if you have the mechanisms to do so. I think going the PEP route brings levels off the playing field just a little bit, but this is a really fortunate situation that you're in that other states have the ability possibly to tap into, and it might be something worth looking into. So thank you for that. I'm going to stick with you, Machli, while we're here. So you've been interested in working in the Hudson County Jail for a while. So can you talk a little bit about the steps that it's taken to get started in the jail?
Yeah, I think one of the key advocates in Hudson County has been folks like the New Jersey Reentry Corp, right? We have that's led, the leader there is former Governor James McGreevey, right? He has led this pipeline for formerly incarcerated to come through and take courses and get support. So that collaboration with the president at the college, with the Hudson County stakeholders, is what really created this foundation of need, right? And it goes through the Department of Continuing Education and Workforce Development, right? And so that department, CEWD, is a department that are looking, or it's data driven, right? It's about how can we use our resources to meet the needs of the county, right? And that's part of the mission of the college. And it's just not just for the educating our traditional students, but it's also meeting the needs of the entire community, the surrounding community of Hudson. So, it is an example is like we tapped into a grant or Scholars Initiative, which was $100,000 through Metallica Scholars Initiative, right? And that was a certification in welding, for example, right? I know that was brought up earlier. And so we're always looking to tap into these opportunities that can help create pathways for formerly incarcerated, those that are incarcerated and leaving and coming home soon, giving them opportunities to tap into these educational pathways. So, we're responding to the workforce development needs of the community, and that's key. But the partnerships is high level, right? The president of the college believes in it. We've had justice education summits. We have, which was a pathway for upward and economic mobility. We have speakers from the Assistant Commissioner of New Jersey Department of Labor. We had presidents of the Council of Community Colleges. We had New Jersey State Senator Teresa Ruiz there. Representatives from the Petey Green Foundation. So we're constantly looking to really do outreach and really educate the masses, the community, on why it's really important that we do this work. And again, it's all connected to the community.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. It's really important to hear all the different levels of buy-in, both within your organization as well as outside, and how this can bring a whole new level of understanding, I think, in terms of reentry and people reintegrating into society. And I think that's what leads to systemic change over time. And I also want to just lift up the fact that you strategically chose what office to put your program into under, because doing so under continuing education, there's typically more supports for non-traditional students. And I think that makes a lot of sense when you look at people reentering. They're obviously more so a stereotypically non-traditional type. So I definitely appreciate that. I'm going to turn next to Lisa. So just wanted to check in on what's been most exciting about working with the community college in this new way. What can you uplift there?
So I just wanted to kind of piggyback real quick on Machli, what he had said about the buy-in. 'Cause again, we're super fortunate here. Sheriff Katusian is such a big supporter and encouragement of pretty much any program, any education we want to run. So it definitely makes my life easier, makes it a lot easier to go after these type of programs. I would say the excitement is just being able to offer more things to both our men and our women. Like I said, we have a very long wait list for college, and to be able to offer a whole other program, besides what we already do, is really exciting. I know we'll be able to get a lot more guys kind of on that path that want to be there. And again, we do have a lot of turnover. So having this 1-year program, the program we have right now is kind of like on the path to an associate's degree. So sometimes the guys will start that and then they leave. And it's really hard to track them once they leave. And I know we have about 8 students, I believe, that have enrolled in a 4-year college, once they left here. But this doing the PEP, the data sharing agreement, all of that will help with tracking and being able to give them the support on the outside that, is something that we want to do, but it's just, difficult. The other thing is having that financial aid help in-house, having the admission counselors in-house, or more accessible for the guys. I know when they finish here and they leave, that can be a stumbling block for them, trying to put all these things into process. Like, how do I get financial aid? Well, where do I go to sign up for classes? And, we all know if something's difficult, we might not want to do it. So if we've got those building blocks or those blocks already in place for them, and we can set them up with a navigator before they leave, they're going to have a much better shot at being successful if they choose to continue in college. So I'm really excited about having that. Another thing is, this Middlesex has been very willing to work with us. There's this program was initially set up to be very tech orientated, and that can be an issue in a high secure environment. So they are definitely willing to work with us. But then it's also been kind of fun to find ways, well, how can we incorporate tech? Because these guys have to be able to get on computers at some point. They have to be able to get familiar with Zoom and things like that, because that's the world we live in. And by bringing in these types of programs and working with the colleges, it's kind of forced our hand a little bit to figure out, okay, how can we offer this? How can we teach our guys but still be secure? And they've been great about it. And we're getting there. And I think without these college programs and these vocational programs, we wouldn't be as far as we are. So it's just exciting to see all the different steps that have to be put in place that are really helping, not just with college, but just life and tech and, all that kind of things that they wouldn't get otherwise.
Thank you so much for that. And I do appreciate talking about the benefits of a new partnership, even if there was an existing one. But now with PEP regulations, there's more, requirements involved and how it could actually strengthen the work that you're doing, the capabilities, the supports for people, especially as they return into the community. So I like the way that you're framing that, like, there are a lot of benefits to moving forward with a college partner. Okay, so I'd like to direct this next question to Muriel. So I know that you're taking on the role of oversight entity for programs operating in the jails. And navigating that mix of enrolling state sentenced people housed in jails, as well as more traditional jail sentenced individuals. So how are you approaching this oversight entity role, given the different, demographics that you have and that you're responsible for?
So our department was part of the experimental Pell, so we have some experience. So now I have a fancy title of oversight entity, which I feel like I already was that. And I will be honest, lessons learned. We had a very, very good provider who is now currently applying again. And then we had one that was not so great. So we learned a lot of lessons along the way, created MOUs up front that had every detail in it to protect the students. That's my main focus, is to make sure that we're protecting these students. This is their money, and just want to make sure that they're getting, the quality education that they deserve. Again, best interest of students. I hate to keep saying that, but we want it to be a similar experience as it would on the outside. So just making sure that that happens, and just I think that it has helped us to have these guidelines in place so that we have that to support us when we do go and look in 2 years. And of course, we'll look prior to 2 years, but, to make sure that these are programs that are quality. And that what I really like is we do a great job in Louisiana, I feel like, at one thing, correctional education. I just think that we do a really good job with it. But what do we do after that? When they get out, there's very little data for us. So I'm excited about seeing where these students go, what happens to them once they finish. Do they continue their education? Do they go get jobs? What happens with them? Of course, reduction in recidivism is our goal. So I'm excited about that part of it, when they do release, and what happens to them after that, because I don't think we do a very good job with that right now.
Thanks for that. And you already started to get into some territory for my next question, so I'm going to stick with you. So you're working with state and local facilities, and you have sentenced people moving from one to another. Not always necessarily thinking about people getting released, but even just thinking about program continuation and transfer of credits, given the very transient nature of the people that you're serving in the carceral spaces. So I'm hoping that you could talk about a little bit of how do you navigate all the transfer of credits and program continuations in such a complex environment?
So we have education programs in 50 facilities across the states. I have regional coordinators that oversee the academic side. Then I have regional coordinators that oversee career and tech ed, post-secondary. And it kind of gets a little murky there sometimes. So my two that are my right and left hand, I couldn't make it without them. They basically run all the programs. And the reason I say that is really difficult whenever you have a student that gets transferred, because to be honest with you, Department of Corrections is not going to be completely focused. Our administration is focused on education, but at the end of the day, it all boils down to security, how many beds are open, different things like that. It's all money, So you want to make sure that these students, are not being removed from programs that they're in. So what we try to do every week, and I know that this sounds old school, but we get a transfer list. And if there's anyone enrolled in education, so it takes my whole team to look at, if there's anyone enrolled in education, then we do not transfer them. Does it happen? Yes. If it happens, I either get them enrolled in the program there immediately, or we get them transferred back. But it very seldom happens. And I hope that that continues to be the case. We're getting new systems in Louisiana, so hopefully we won't have to do something like that, or to just flag them once they're, enrolled in education, they won't move them. But just also, if the student becomes qualifies for the transitional work program, they're able to make some money in transitional work programs, and trying to convince them, hey, stay in school, I want you to get this degree, or trying to figure out ways to incorporate these programs into some of our transitional work programs so that they can come in at night and take some of these courses. So like Lisa was saying, technology has always been a struggle. We do have a secure technology provider, have computer labs in most of our facilities. And they also have access to launch books. Do we need more? Yes. So that's why I'm a part of the digital equity funding, and hoping that we get a lot of money with that. I've made a big ask of having over 5,000 devices statewide. And, all they can say is, go big or go home. So we'll see if I get them. But just to go back to the actual question, we just try to do the best that we can, and it doesn't happen a whole lot. And if it does, somebody's going to call me. If one slips through the cracks, I'll have a warden call me, and it all boils down to administration. If the administration supports what you're doing, it's going to be successful.
Thank you so much for that. And it's great to hear that you have developed systems that allowed, for as little as few students as slipping through the cracks as possible, because I know that's a challenge, especially with transfers and things of that nature. I also just really appreciate how you have all your staff on the same page too with it. I know that especially when you're working in large systems, in theory, it's great to have these policies, but having it in practice is another. And it's great to see that you've been able to navigate some of those often challenges in a large correction system. All right. So, Machli, I wanted to ask you about challenges. What challenges, I know you're on the college side, and I think it's very important for jails administration to also take that into account. So what challenges have you encountered in launching programs in jails?
I think most of the challenges are, as you may say, on the inside, right? It's, making sure the internet is all ready to go and connected, getting the buy-in, the personnel buy-in, getting the staff on board, right? I mean, a lot of that will happen from the very top. And I think that, sometimes there could be challenges on the bottom of the chain of command if, if you get folks that are not, playing along to make this a smooth transition. But for the most part, at the very top of the chain, when it comes to all the different folks that I've mentioned, everybody is locking step, right, moving forward. And so we don't find that there's any challenges when it comes to leadership, vision, ideas, how this should move forward. It's the things that you really can't control, right? So if there is challenges on the inside, if they're on lockdown, or if they're, what I'm saying, those are the things you just can't control, and you have to just maneuver around that and follow their lead on that, right? Because I believe that based on our collaboration, they want this opportunity just as bad for them, but there are also some rules and regulations that needs to be followed for the safety of all those that are in there. So we find that there's not much of a hiccup outside of the uncontrollable, right? And so when we're not able to get in there, when we're not able to support, we just, kind of really prepare ourselves to follow up on and a lot of that is, again, on our end, having to follow up with professors saying the course is not, class is not on today, we got to wait. It's, it may take 3 days, but we have to be flexible. This is an environment that you have to be very flexible and you have to adapt, right? And that's really key of being successful in this environment. So I didn't find like there's a lot of, once you get used to that, I don't feel like there's a lot of challenges. The challenges would be more at the very top, and as long they're all in sync, I think it's streamlined going forward, and it's moving, it's moving ahead with success.
Thank you for that. And I think it does uplift the fact that, things happen that are unpredictable. And so having contingency plans and ways to adapt is definitely something that maybe as best as possible can be thought about in advance, to know, okay, if there's a lockdown, how do we adapt? What do we do? So I appreciate you bringing that to light. Okay, last question is for Lisa, and I'd love to just end on this positive note. I'd love to hear some of the success stories that you've seen among the people who enroll in college in your facility.
So I have a few guys. They're just quick short stories, but the first one, he was in my first college class that we ran when I started here. And it just sticks out because he got his first assignment back, and he kind of looked at it, and he's a smart kid. And he kind of looked back at me. He's like, Lisa, I'm like, and I was like, what's the matter? And I know he had done well. And he turned around and he had gotten an A on his paper. And he just looks at me and he's so serious, goes, if I had known I could have done this on the outside, my life would have been so much different. And it broke my heart. It made me extremely proud of him, but it broke my heart at the same time. Because a lot of these guys who come in here have the capability. They either don't have the support, they don't have the options, they don't have whatever it is, they just, they fall into the wrong crowds or whatever. And it takes coming to jail to realize that, there's another way and you can do it and you can be successful. I had another student who came in, did not have his high set or his GED and got that with us, moved into the college program, ended up leaving, getting transferred out of here. But when he left, he had a 4.0 GPA after about 6 or 7 classes. Another student, so we just had our first graduation ceremony since 2019. It stopped with COVID, and so we just got that going 2 weeks ago. And we actually had our first student earn his associate's degree. He got his diploma at the graduation, which was phenomenal. And then our last one, again, this guy, he was at the graduation and we were able to bring the families in. And at one point, the sheriff invited the students, if they had children there, the children could come and sit on their laps with their dads or their moms and watch them get their diplomas or their high school, degree, whatever they were getting that day. And to watch his 4-year-old son with just pride on his face, a big smile. His 16-year-old son was there as well. Big smile, so proud of their father. I'm sure it's upsetting to see him in the situation, but at that point, it was just, their dad was a student and he was succeeding and they got to see that. And it was amazing.
Thank you. I'm really glad we ended our panel on that note, just because I think this panel has highlighted some of the challenges, some of the important considerations. What I've also heard is it takes a long time. It's a lot of work. It's not an overnight process. But this is why we're doing it, right? These really powerful stories to end on. So thank you. I do want to thank all of my panelists for your participation. This is helping to make this session more informative. I can talk about the regulations all day, but it's really helpful to hear these messages from people in the field doing the work. So I want to thank you all again for your time and attention. And I'm going to close us out with some resources and considerations. And I do have your emails on the very last slide if anybody wants to reach out. But other than that, I'm going to go ahead and continue. And once again, thank you so much for your participation. Like I said, contact information is on the last screen. Do not hesitate to reach out to us. But I want to move forward sharing some considerations and resources for getting started. So if you're thinking about getting started, there are a few things you might wish to consider to help you determine how you want to proceed. So first, how do you want to handle pre-sentenced or non-criminally sentenced populations? Do you want a joint program? Do you want 2 separate programs? Maybe this doesn't apply to you if you are only having one population versus the other, but for those who have more of these mixed populations, how do you navigate that duality? Next, look into whether there are other funding sources. Some states or counties have grants that may cover the cost of tuition. If that's the case, you may not need to tap into federal financial aid. So think about the funding aspect of it and whether you have to go to that PEP federal aid route because there are no other options, or whether there are options. And whether you still want to go that PEP route and think about how these options complement or supplement one another, or if you just want to go an alternate route. And lastly, think about what programs would make the most sense based on contextual factors. If you have people serving shorter sentences, you may want certificate programs or associate programs. If you have longer sentence lengths, even a bachelor's program could be possible in a jail setting. So we encourage you to look into sentence lengths when you're considering what might make the most sense in terms of credential. And we also want to encourage you to look into workforce need. We want the people re-entering to have their best chances at successful careers. So are there certain programs to get credentialed in a particular field that will increase that likelihood of a successful career? And lastly, I want to share some resources with you. I have a couple slides on resources. So these can help you get started. At the Vera Institute of Justice, we have several reports and toolkits available, so feel free to look into those. The U.S. Department of Education also has a frequently asked questions page, as well as a knowledge center on their websites. They also have a really responsive email. So I think they respond in at least like one business day typically on average. So if you have any questions, please feel free to direct them to the Department of Education. If you are representing a federal facility or you're a college interested in starting a program in a federal facility, the Federal Bureau of Prisons has an internal document that can guide the process. So if you're on the corrections side, you'll have that in your Sally Port. If you're on the college side, reach out to the representative at that facility to learn more about what their process is. And finally, I just wanted to share that there are other organizations who have resources for college programs in jail. So I have some of them on the screen. Please feel free to pause this recording to access the slides and look into these different toolkits and other documents and networks that are available. So I want to thank everyone for their time and attention. Again, like I said, we are leaving our contact information for you so that you can be in touch if you have additional questions or you want to learn more. So that's all we have planned for today. I hope you all have a great day. Take care.